Are we on? I've got 6 o'clock, so I'll do this and we'll call the meeting to order. Thank you for coming out tonight. We'll start, as we always do, with the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you'll stand with us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 6 o'clock. Well, maybe we could see you guys all taking off.
You were open.
Carrie, if you'll read the roll call.
Mr. Steinberg. Mrs. Rorich.
Here.
Mr. White.
Here.
Mr. Whittington.
Here.
Mayor Oranger.
Here. We do have a quorum, so we can get started. We do have a few items. This is a special council meeting, in essence, for the most part, to go over our 2023 budget. So we've got all of our department heads and different departments with us here tonight. And we do have a few items that we'll take care of on some business as we wrap up tonight. Is there anything that's not on our agenda tonight? I'll look for a motion then to approve tonight's agenda.
I'll second.
And any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that carries. All right, so then we'll jump right into it. I know Jennifer and the department heads have been working on our 2023 budget, so you should have that in your packet in front of you. Jennifer, do you want to just give a lead in, and then we can see if we have any specific departmental questions, then we can release some of these people if they want to get out of here and finish up. But
Absolutely. I'm going to pull this a bit closer. I do have a part after the departments go through and present their requests to kind of review just an overview of the budget process and some important factors to keep in mind. But basically, what you have in front of you this evening is the first draft of the preliminary 2023 budget, and that includes the fire department's request, police department's request, public works requests, and then all other general fund and enterprise budget requests. So when we get to my portion, I'll just kind of share with you what it looks like as far as proposed tax levy, tax rate, and we can go from there. But it might be most productive just to start with the department heads, have them walk through their requests, and then you'll get an idea of what they're looking for, and then at the end I can show you the impact that will have on the overall budget and tax levy. And I will just make a quick note that we had a problem with our HDMI cable, and so we're working with our IT to cast basically the information on my laptop onto the screen, but we're a little far away, so that's why sometimes it's pixelating, but kind of comes and goes. I apologize about that. We'll have to work through that issue. But other than that, I guess if you're okay with it, Mayor and City Council, we could turn over to the fire department, let them present their request, and kick off the process.
very good.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to just dive into this, I guess. What I've spec'd out here or we've spec'd out here for our numbers, mainly what I did was we went through the comparisons to the 2022 budget and what we've seen for shortfalls in our budget so far. And those are the areas that that we're looking to increase. There's a few different areas. If we just start at the top, work our way down. Wages and salaries. To start with, we're looking at, I'd like to be able to raise a couple of salaries. The assistant chief, for one, doesn't get any pay right now, and there's a considerable amount of work that it takes from all of us officers in order to make this happen. Since we are all volunteers, we're still putting in a tremendous amount of time to make things work, taken away from everybody's family life. So I'd like to be able to give everybody something. So Yeah, so that's why that increase is there, that way we could have some type of salary for them as well. Not asking for a lot. I don't know that we've set any certain numbers, but we just thought we'd get something there, so there's something to look at. The calls, trainings, and wages, we're looking at building a tier system to kind of award people for numbers of calls that they're making. You know, we'd like to be able to award them for if they get over 30% of the calls for the year, that they could be in a different tier so that they can receive more than the allotted $10 per call, which is all we get for a call. And then also on any calls that we would be out longer than 1 hour, say on any of the fire calls, so on average, those are looking at close to 5 hours by the time you get done cleaning hose and getting all the vehicles ready to respond the next time. So again, that's a considerable amount of time. 5 hours for $10 is not very much, especially when a lot of people like myself leave work for these calls. So it'd be nice to be able to, again, compensate them for that. Relief Association payment, you see that pretty much, that's staying flat. We're anticipating, maybe I could let Trent speak to that when he gets when I'll have him follow me up here. And then the operating supplies, as you can see, that's of course with the increase in everything. Those numbers have gone up from last year being 5,500. We're already at 66.2%. And this was, this is July's totals, if I remember right. And we're already at 66.2, so which means July's totals would have been through the end of May, or the end of June, so the start of July. So as you can see that, anyway, we're exceeding already, and we're not even to the end of the year. We've got a lot of stuff, our medical supplies, like I said, everything's gone up quite a bit. Fuel, kind of a no-brainer, again, with the price of fuel that's gone up. Repair and maintenance, I touch on that one. That one we had a hit this year pretty hard from our ladder truck, 4312. We don't anticipate that kind of expense every year, which is a good thing. It's kind of a risk you take when you buy used equipment, though. Eventually, it's going to have a lot of money that's going to need to get spent on it. So this year, we kind of blew that budget out of the water. We were budgeted at $18,000 for this year. Year-to-date amount is $47,475. So as you could tell, that truck really hurt us this year, putting us over already by a little over 29,000, almost 29.5. Next year, we asked for 28,000 to bump it up from 18,000, just to help plan for some of these costs. Not that we anticipate to use all that again, just so we have it. And then our physicals, you can see we've hit 58% of our budget, but we've already, I anticipate maybe 1 or 2 more physicals this year so far is all I'm seeing, so I don't really anticipate getting close to the full amount. So that's why we figured it'd be okay to drop that one down. Professional services, I'll skip right over that one, sorry. That number again remains the same. It's not something that we're pushing on too hard. We'll get down to, the electric utilities and the gas utilities, again, not much we can do about those. Those are rising prices, and we got to have some type of allowance for that, unfortunately. It's sad it's hitting everybody's budget the way it is, pocketbooks at home. So it's just rough. So dues and subscriptions, that stays the same again. The meeting and education, that we're asking for another, last year we were budgeted 11,000, this year I'd like to see 15,000. We've got a lot of different trainings that I would like to send people on. And we're already at 82% of that. Once we get done with the Chiefs Conference this year, I was allowing 3 of us to go, the 3 chiefs, myself and the 2 assistants. That's pretty much going to take care of every bit of what we had left. So again, there's a lot of different trainings that our guys could have attended. There was some really good extrication training. There was some good live burn trainings that I chose not to offer to the people just because of trying to keep in the restraints that we had. So again, I'd like to see that increased a little bit. Every bit, of training that we can get is, it's not just playtime. It's trying to develop muscle memory. And in a time of crisis, that's what we need, is that muscle memory. So it's important to have those trainings. And then the capital outlay, we're looking to increase that a pretty good chunk. There's a couple of different things that we're looking at to adding into there. I believe, again, Trent can help me speak to this, but we're looking at a couple of different things. One of them is I was hoping to have some numbers for a possible shed, garage addition to the fire station. What we really need is a different fire station. Ours is nowhere close to compliant, but we've made it work. My fear is putting too much money into fixing this station and then not being able to get a new one because of putting all that money into it, or building a shed like this. A rough guesstimate that I was given by Morton Buildings was approximately $400,000 for a heated shed that is 4 14-foot wide stalls to allow the movement of our blocker, our trailer, and those type of primarily not first out equipment, I guess would be a good way to put it, that we could keep in that shed, free up a lot of space inside the station house. Especially if you walk into that south bay, there isn't much room in there. We've got 4 trucks stuffed into that little bay. Even if we took out 24, our blocker, and put that outside, we'd still have 3 trucks in there. There'd be a little more room, but it's still a lot of trucks to have in a small space starting up, and letting that exhaust into the building. Again, that's all part of the station being non-compliant. So that is something that we did look into. We're looking at a building site analysis for placement of a new station, possible placement of a new station should be the way that's worded. And that site analysis, we were quoted $25,000 for that site analysis. Also, we've looked into, back to the original, or the existing station, we've looked into fixing the parking lot on the north and the west side of the building. Not much parking lot there, but it is pretty rough. There's a sinkhole in it, which has been a problem for quite a while. But so getting that all shored up properly, that quote came back at $13,000, and we've got problems with the HVAC. I believe it's a condenser unit is bad. It's causing condensate to drip down through the ceiling in the station, wetting the ceiling tiles. So that's something that needs to be replaced next year. It's not one of the ones that I don't feel it's optional, like a parking lot that's there. You know what I mean? So anyway, so Trent, if you want to take over with the rest of the capital outlay and whatever else we're looking at. I didn't mention anything about extrication tools or any of that stuff either. So.
All right, thank you. For the record, Trent Talley, 424 Thomas Drive, and Assistant Chief. So I wanted to thank everyone for the opportunity to come and talk to you about the budget here and considering the budget moving forward for 2023. This is on page 31, and Vern spoke to those items, and that's really what you would look at, for the next year, 2023. If we go back, I think 2 slides, we'll see on page 29, some of the bigger expenditures we're looking at potentially in 2023 from the capital outlay. pulling money from that as well as from gambling funds. So we did include in 2022, we did include some battery-powered extrication equipment, mainly to help out with Highway 14 and just our speed of our able to help rescue victims that are in car crashes. So there's $38,000. That is included in our CIP for 2022. So it's something we may bring in front of you here in the next month or two to consider purchasing that. The rest of these items are moving forward. 2023 headsets in our truck, just so the firefighters can talk without having to scream over the sirens. Again, that'd be a CIP purchase to pull from that fund. We need an additional hose. We just had a hose test a couple weekends ago. We had some hose that did not pass inspection, so we recommend pulling $7,000 from CIP there. Additional equipment for that old 1995 pumper, if we're going to make that NFPA compliant, so $15,000 there. Airbags, just for lifting vehicles. Again, I believe we have a grant for part of that from Walmart. So there's some grant money available for that would help reduce that. And then also rope rescue equipment, just to help if we're doing a situation with a roof, and we've had a couple of those in the past. So this is what we're looking for 2023. If you flip the page or scroll down to the next page on page 30, this is more of a long-term view. So we're trying to look out 5 years. What do we anticipate, moving forward? As Vern mentioned, there's some challenges with our current station. So we'd recommend either putting some additional money into that or look at possible site location study for the future. Looking at our larger expenses, so anything that's included in this would be something that is over $1,000, something that's a large purchase. And we had just proposed anything in red, kind of in that 2023. Those are the proposed expenses that we just discussed. And then moving out further, if we look at some of those darker blue highlighted numbers, that would be a potential truck purchase in 2025, just to meet NFPA's requirement of there shouldn't be a truck that's over 25 years old responding to a call. So I think that's all that we had that we wanted to discuss. I don't know if you guys had any questions, anything else you wanted us to go over?
So Trent, your additional items there on top, the proposed expenditures outside of normal budget, you've got those called out, some CIP. And so the red items on our list are the ones that you're proposing using for that?
See on this far left column, that would be this year. So if it's in like red with white letters, we spent that. So that was approved in 2022 and we spent that amount. If it's in red letters with white background, that's what we're proposing to spend next year to be pulled from that fund.
So you're taking out of those truck funds, in essence, to put into some other equipment?
To enhance the trucks, essentially.
Okay.
Can you clarify, I just want to make sure too, so the $25,000 for the building site analysis is not anywhere reflected in any of the budget requests information?
Thank you for bringing that up. So I think if we go back to page 29, Jennifer had highlighted there in yellow. In our current budget, we have, I think, City Hall's in there, and I think the city building is in there, but we don't currently have anything for the station. We have the fire department budget that helps with like a lot of our operating supplies, our medical supplies, truck supplies. We don't have anything there for the station. So that's one thing we wanted to bring up moving forward. We think the station probably needs to be in there. Again, we have some HVAC issues. There's some hydrants around town that don't all have the same connection, so we have to have special fittings if we're going to use anything on Luray, for example. We'd like to streamline that so everything in town has the same connection. So if we go and there's a fire, we don't have to worry about, hey, no, it's that other fitting. Go grab the blue fitting. And then, like Vern said, our parking lot is in kind of rough shape and it needs to be patched or fixed. And then just moving forward with a long-term study on, hey, is that the best building and what does the future look like for the station?
Could you also add, I think, did you say the existing building is not compliant right now? How do you determine compliance? Is it based on like the trucks and the hose size?
So if I don't know where that threshold is, but if we said, all right, we're gonna renovate that station, we're gonna do some things to try and make it better, there's a threshold at which it needs to meet ADA compatibility. and the station does not meet any of that. So if we're going to try and get it up to ADA compatibility, we're going to look at spending probably just as much money as we would to tear it down and build a new station.
Plus, there's the ventilation in the building. Whenever you're not supposed to have the exhaust dumping from the vehicles inside of the building, and you're definitely not supposed to have your gear in the same bay area where the trucks run, and we have both of those things that exist in our station currently.
Is that something we could get in trouble for?
I don't know if it's anything that we can get in trouble for, but I know it's definitely something that we're trying to move away from with a lot of our different hoods that we're getting, you know, different particulate clothing and hoods and gloves to protect us from exactly those kind of exposures while we're on the fire scene. Why would we want that on our gear at the station from our own vehicles?
What is the timeline if you, and I didn't look at, if you do the site analysis, did they say how long it takes to get that back? I apologize, it's probably in there and I don't remember if I glossed over that.
You know, I don't know the exact timeline. I think that's something the engineers go through and they look at response times, they look at infrastructure from the city, they look at future growth potential and where the city is expanding, and they try to come up with, hey, here's your 3 top locations on where that site might be. And it just lays the foundation for, hey, if we want to take the next step, we have the foundation done, we can start looking at what do we need to do.
So does someone come inspect the building, or is this kind of just your own analysis, or how does that, how do these things come up? Is there a list that you guys gotta go by, or someone come by and say, you know, this isn't compliant, this isn't compliant? Or how does it go about, you know?
Yeah, very good. So we have an engineer on the fire department. Most of the information would be coming from him. So he's worked for Bolton and Mink in the past, and it's certainly in his skill set to be able to determine that. This would be looking at outsourcing, and this particular company that we got the estimate from, they're the one that are doing the St. Peter station. So they're doing something local. Tim, I think you certainly have resources in this area or have done something in the past. He would be very familiar with it.
Yeah, I think what Anthony's asking though is there, you know, what's the fire department standards? You know, how do, you know, this is for design or selecting a new station. I think what you're getting at is, you know, Vern, you say it's not NFPA compliant. Is there a list that NFPA sends out? You know, so you mentioned a few things, exhaust. You know, so if you've got a truck running, you should have an exhaust system in there, and carbon monoxide detection and.
My question is, if it's not compliant, then how can we use it? You know what I mean? That's kind of where I'm at.
We've been getting by.
Dangerous, you know, where, like, what's the threshold of where you're coming from, how it's not compliant, is what I'm asking.
Typically, when you renovate, you have to bring it up to code compliance. So if,
Grandfather, you know, I guess.
to some degree, yeah. You know, so if we did nothing, it remains. I mean, we've got trucks that, you know, have always had issues that have come up with MnDOT, and I think one of your things is bringing that one truck up to NFPA compliance as well. Is that the extra
Yes.
truck?
That is 24, just to have it to where if it does respond, which we wouldn't, as of now, we wouldn't use it for a life-saving situation. But we do want it to be able to use it as a backup pump so take for instance, when we have somebody interior, we have to have one truck pumping to another truck just in case one fails. That's part of the reason why we need so many trucks. And so we could use this truck as a secondary truck in that situation. We could not use it as the primary pumper. So it would be nice that if we did have one of our other trucks go down, like what is the problem that we're having with, say, 4311 right now, to where Porpoise is real bad going down the road. We're trying to get to the bottom of that. We're having Timberlands installed into the back of that coming up here. What's that, next week, is it, Trent? In the Timberlands?
Wednesday.
Wednesday. So that should help take care of that situation, but that's a time when that truck, we'd like to be able to utilize it as something other than just a blocker during that time frame, so that if something does come in, we still have the abilities to support our city as needed.
Right. Well, what if we would have sold it? Then I guess is the question that would come up. You know, you're saying we need to have a secondary, but we were listing that for sale for the last couple of years. So if we would have sold it, we wouldn't have had this backup
True.
truck.
Then you page Madison Lake.
Yes, then we page Madison Lake and St. Clair and wait for their response times, which could be critical.
Right. Yeah, I think, that's kind of some of the things the council would be interested in, is we were trying to get rid of that, and now we're trying to re-equip it for use, and,
Well, if we have it, we feel that it should be ready to
yeah,
deploy.
I mean, I get that.
And if it's not ready to deploy, well, then why do you have it? So,
Right.
yeah.
But the amount of equipment that we're putting on there is a bare minimum. We're not planning on stocking it with any of the, like the new extrication equipment that we're looking at that is to be placed on the 4301, so that we have the ability to have either battery powered or hydraulic powered at the scene. We ran into different scenes where it would have been quite beneficial to have the battery operated. I don't want to give any details of some of the crashes, but there's been a few times where, it'd been nice to be able to grab that, take off and run, and get further away than having to grab the pump system that we have already on the truck and drag that across the field with us.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different pieces of equipment that we're not placing on this truck. It's just primarily the hose and the ladder and that type of stuff that we want to place on that truck.
I'm gonna circle back to where Anthony was getting to, and I think, as I look at the proposal from Five Bugles, and Five Bugles is an architectural firm, and they design lots of fire stations all around. If we wanted to do something, to me, it's the first bit, selecting where a station could go. They've got $5,000 to $10,000 to come in here and draw up our existing station, which we're all basically saying, why are we doing that? Unless the study says this is the prime spot in town to have a station, then, in my mind, you'd move up to, all right, now let's see how we can modify what we've got to fit all of these pieces. So when I look at a $25,000 study, I'm seeing 5,000 is all that's truly needed at this time, because we did that when we looked at where to place City Hall. We selected a number of locations around town, and I think it was a very good exercise, and I think if we did something, I'd like to see us study where should the fire station go, regardless of what sits there currently. If there's something that's currently there that maybe is, underutilized or something, and we could find a place, this would be prime land for public safety, that, I would like to see that study done before we start drawing up the what-ifs and things like that. So, in essence, the NFPA things, yeah, there's all sorts of items that they could probably list for you that aren't necessarily up to code. So your lockers, a lot of times, you've got to have, 5 feet of clearance between trucks. Do we have that in all of our trucks?
On that north bay we do, and that's why we have so many trucks on the south bay now, is because we moved it out of that bay to allow for that.
So it's motion, getting firefighters in, equipped, and moving around without banging into each other, and visibility when you're loading and offloading. So they could list a whole bunch of things that, I think would come up in this $5,000 to $10,000 existing condition assessment if we want them to spend money to tell us where we're falling short. I think we already know. Unless they said, hey, man, this spot where the fire station exists, I wouldn't move that location. Then we start talking about, okay, what does it look like? 2-story, wrap around. We still have movement problems and trying to get those trucks back in from the main roads. So more than likely, that's not the location for it, in my opinion. Now,
But that's the first step, like you said.
Centrally located.
Yeah,
but-
it is. But that's the first step, like you said.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, all we're looking to do is start moving forward.
Personally, I don't know the process that Five Bugle uses. I'm not familiar with that. I know that they spent quite a while examining for St. Peter. But as far as selecting which part of the process you want to go first,
Right, right. No, I mean, you know, it's 5 for the first GIS, you know, location study. Then it was 5 to 10 for the existing condition survey. That, they're coming to our station, drawing that up. You know, it's useful if you're gonna renovate, or it's useful in saying, it's gonna cost $492,000 to fix these things if you wanna make this station compliant, versus it's $2 million to build a new station. And then the last is your conceptual plan, so they've selected a site, and now we design a concept to set there. So, I mean, that can be down the line. This could be a, you know, I don't know how long they did St. Peter's. It could have been a 2-year
It was a long time.
process.
Yeah.
It's been at least that. I think it's close to 4 right now.
Yeah.
They've been involved in trying to get that station put up.
I was going to ask, so going back, Trent, to your capital improvement layout. So taking some money off of each truck to come up with some of those other, you know, equipment pieces, we've got 3 vehicles currently tracking to be replaced all in 2025.
So that is just looking to take money from 3 different trucks to buy 1 vehicle, to be able to have enough money to put toward one
Sure.
vehicle.
But next year's expenditures would be for the extrication equipment, the hoses, the radios.
Correct.
That's where we're
Yep.
allocating those dollars. No, I just think future councils will be like, I don't think we're gonna be buying 3 trucks in a year, so.
Which trucks did we spec out the headgear for?
Well, it's the 99, the 2020, and the 2013.
Yeah, so there's 3 trucks proposed for 2023. It was the rescue, so 4301. It was the tanker, 4322, and the pumper that we just got, the 2020. So that's 4311.
Yeah, our 3 primary response vehicles. We didn't elect to go with all of them right away.
Right. No, I just, as you track these out, future, you know, the pushback you get on trucks and how we adjust some of these things, and, but you know, I guess I'm not opposed to taking the dollars out of the line items to get the equipment that we need now. It's just that, you know, buying 3 trucks in a season isn't, that would be a very hard sell, so.
No, the plan there is just the 1 truck. It's just trying to get enough money to buy 1 truck.
Right.
Yeah.
We're never gonna have enough money to buy just 1 truck.
That would probably
We keep
take care of
saving and we
it.
keep saving, and they keep getting more and more expensive.
Can I say something here too? As we look ahead, this is kind of daunting, like the mayor referenced some new council members and new ones that'll be coming in. You know, as you look at or you're hearing about the fire station needs, something to keep in mind, I don't think we'd qualify for probably grant funding because we have a higher median income, so we probably wouldn't meet the thresholds or stay below the thresholds to get grant funding. But there is, like, USDA rural development does have low interest loan funds available, so if we got to a situation where we had to move forward and get a new station, I mean, that is an option, because I know it's a little daunting when you look at this and capital outlay and thinking millions of dollars for a new station and land acquisition. Just wanted to throw that out there. You probably see as other funding sources too, that's just something out there.
So just throw one other thing out there, the capital improvement plan. This has been in place probably since 2009. So I worked with the city administrator at that point in time to work on it. And the amount just increases by the average CPI, Consumer Price Index. So it only goes up 3% every year. That seemed to be enough to get us what we need. I know, Tim, sometimes we have to delay that a year or 2 to get enough money for a truck, but so far it's worked out really well for the city to put money away, and I think that's the last line item that you see on your budget. So I think it's about $130,000. Was that right?
Yep.
Yeah, $130,000 for 2023.
But I don't see in the capital program anything for a new fire station? Should that be added as we kind of start building toward that?
Yeah, that's, I think, what Trent is saying too. There's no line item to start saving for any of that.
Right.
You know, and obviously, by doing some of this study, you know, we could start the process, but yeah, if there was a new line item for that. You know, obviously, we're not gonna probably save enough money to build a new fire station, but
It's kind of like save enough for the house down payment, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
So we don't have a line item either then for the regular improvements such as the HVAC and parking lot stuff, like that's just, when that comes up, we sit and say, how we paying for it, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
So do we need to be looking at that for future years too, whether it be at the existing station or even when a new one's built? Or how do we go about that piece of it too?
Just an operations budget. You've got repair and maintenance, that's generally for trucks.
Has there been other expenses that have been having to come out that's specific to the building and not, I mean, and I know there's been equipment inside the building that's gotten replaced, but is there stuff specific to the building that's had to get fixed or remodeled or anything like that recently?
So Tim, when we did the outside, when we did the insulation, I think that was just a separate line item.
Yeah.
That was what, 200,000 or something like that?
Yeah. You've had little things, I think you did
There's
something
been
with your
some
doors
furnace and, yeah.
There's been little expenditures over time, and I don't know where they come out of if,
If it's a big item, we probably just
right.
created it for that year.
All the lights that I redid inside the, or should I say, we redid inside the meeting room, the downstairs office, and the hallway up front, when I replaced all of those, switched them over to LED, all of that came out of the repairs and maintenance budget.
Yeah, so some of the smaller ones, they've been,
Able to just kind of pull out of the.
Just
normal-
juggling
Right.
it, probably.
but yeah, if we did, you know, the last renovation to put the ephes on the outside and do some changes, that was just a city project, if I recall, that whatever that cost was at the time.
Yeah.
So it didn't come out of a budget, but. Do we have, Jennifer, other operational budget lines for our other facilities, like Public Works and City Hall?
So, I mean, like, for instance, City Hall, where we have it, we don't, you know, the building's relatively new, in good shape, so we don't have, a lot of repairs, but we do have a line item capital outlay set aside, where we, you know, can set aside, and we just put in small amounts, because there's just little things that can come up and happen in the building. But let's see, I'll give you an example, let's see here, for streets. I guess, you know, at this point, we would have probably just coded under capital outlay set aside. Something we could look into if we wanna just do, like you're saying, if you wanna somehow differentiate within, like, just trying to think of how you can make sure you're allocating to the right department without being in the fire department. That might be something I could do some research on and figure out where's the best spot to put that for building improvements.
Yeah, I mean, it would be probably a wise thing, you know, if you've got HVAC problems over there right now, this would be a perfect line item to, you know, address the building maintenance pieces. If we had a roof issue, if we, you know, I mean, at all of our buildings, granted, you know, the other two are newer, so, you know, we still have, you know, some of that, but it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to start tucking a little money away for those inevitable pieces that come up for maintenance.
That is something we didn't mention, is the roof in there. On the north bay, when we get a heavy rain, it still drips down onto our truck in that north bay, so, you know, that is another area that there is a repair that's needed. If
Right.
it's minor rain, little rain, like what we've been getting here and there, it doesn't seem to be a problem. If there's a downpour, a heavy downpour that throws a couple inches at a time, that'll leak.
Sure. So at this point, Jennifer, what you've got in the overall budget meets the blue items
Yes.
on the
Just to
list?
clarify, I do not have anything in there for the site analysis, so.
Correct, yeah, because that's down in these last
Yep.
4 items on,
But yes, you're correct, Mayor. Everything that's in blue is in the budget. Yep.
you know, so if we had a line item of $20,000 for operational repairs, you know, it could cover the parking lot and the HVAC pieces. The hydrant repairs, you know, might be a thing to look at. Does that come out of a street department budget? What's that?
He said the parking lot would take most of that out, so yeah, the parking lot was 15 alone.
Or
I think the quote we got from
I got
Nielsen
13 on here,
was
so-
13.
13 and then the 6 for the HVAC, so, yeah, wiping it out right away, but at least then it's accounted for and we can start to track, you know, this is kind of a line item that works for that.
So maybe what I could do is we could add, I don't know if we can or not, but add another line item that says capital outlay, just building or grounds. Could that work?
I would like to see a facilities line item.
Facilities,
Yeah.
okay.
That's what's normally happens once you start acquiring a bunch of buildings, right? And you have to maintain them and the property.
Yeah, we've never really set a lot of money aside for maintaining the buildings. There's always maintenance.
Everything's getting old at the same time.
That's what happens when you burn out of the appliances in the package, right?
But hydrant threads and things, you know, is that more of a street department expenditure?
Ooh, I gotta think about, I'm trying to think, if we replace the parking lot at City Hall, we would probably categorize that as a City Hall expenditure, don't you think, with the auditors? They would probably, that might be an auditor question, I'll ask about that, I'll find out on that.
I'm just saying to at least have something in the budget in 2023, you know, if that 5,000 went to the street department, I mean, it's a
Oh.
water service connection, we just want to make sure that it's fit for the equipment they have to hook up to it. Is just Leray Avenue has the different,
That's our understanding at this time. So there was a current street project in Mankato that was going on the same time that was. Those are all Mankato hydrants.
that's right, I kind of remember that.
So it goes back a long time. Goes back to Rick days. So it's been an issue for a long time. We're working with Michael in the city of Mankato to identify that and get the new fittings to put on there. So he doesn't have an exact number, but he said 5,000 at this time would definitely take care of it. To
Because
get those
otherwise you've
ordered.
got two different
We have to have
couplings.
different fittings to make it work, yeah. Under pressure, the hose will fly off. Not a good thing.
Is that something that we could do an overall assessment of the entire community and Michael's he's trying to do that, or I mean, can we identify each hydrant and,
We can identify each hydrant, and we have it mapped out already.
because it would be good to at least get us uniform throughout town.
Agreed, yeah.
We used to have them painted with blue on them.
So you knew which ones you were heading up to?
Yes, and that's why we had blue fitting on the truck, kind of made it a little easier, trying to prevent, mishaps. But I haven't been over there lately. I know there's been a few different, hydrant painting projects by, say, Girl Scouts and stuff. So I don't know that they all still are.
I think they're all red. I don't think there's any blue ones anymore.
It's a great project that they're doing.
So just to clarify, we'll take the 5,000, I lost my place here, and just add that to our water fund, right? Just to clarify, I'm sorry, I was writing stuff down for the hydrants.
Yeah, and if, the fire department budget had a $20,000 line item for facilities maintenance,
Okay.
that then just leaves the, planning for new facility as something we don't have currently budgeted.
Okay.
So then we'd have to find, I mean, if we want to jump into that, I mean, that's up to the council if we want to jump into that, how are we going to do that? You know, and again, my take on what I read through there, you know, it seems like it would work to get started at that $5,000 level, to start pinpointing these are sites where it would be wise to have a station, or the pros and cons of it. You know, time to respond. You know, I think we looked at it briefly at one point, you know, like railroad crossing. You know, now you've got the highway stuff involved, so, I mean, it would be a worthwhile exercise, I think, for them to say, in our professional opinion, this is, if you're gonna move down building a new station, this is where you should site it, and, you know, then we can look at where we go from there. Now, we do have, you know, kind of some other plans in place for a water filtration facility, and I don't know if that's something, you know, that would lend itself to campus type
Well, that was gonna be my question,
construction.
is if we're looking at the water treatment facility and some of these other pieces, does this kind of go hand in hand where we can look at the bigger picture from the city standpoint, not only 2 years out, but the next 10 years, to get at least property somewhat acquired before we don't have that option available, you know, just like we talked about the treatment facility, so. I mean, we could go 5 years where nothing happens and all of a sudden get a year like we have where everything's kind of getting developed quick and we don't have that option
Mhm.
anymore. So can those two projects kind of go hand in hand together a little bit, or? I'm assuming they're two different companies though that would be managing them both, because I don't think
Right, yeah.
they would.
I think it's something definitely in Bolton and Mink's wheelhouse. I think they could probably do it if they're already doing some other work for the city, something they could probably handle. We didn't get a quote from them on that, but as Tim was mentioning, we think it's probably a good idea to take that first step and just kind of get that analysis so we can make an educated decision on if we want to move forward, and if we did, where would we go?
Right.
Right.
Does anybody else have any other questions specifically about what's proposed? Vern, I don't know if you can answer, so I'm kind of going back to your original layout here. For the calls and training wages, we currently have $20,000 in our budget. Do we have any idea of where we're going to end up with in 2022 based upon, you know, because we pay that out once at the end of the year, right? That's a one-time deal, so it's really,
Yeah, the call volume's up again from last year, of course. Every year it's been increasing. We're currently, I believe the last one was 111 was our ICR, 110? I could look it up if we're 113. So, and last year, I think we finished the year at 186, wasn't it? So our call volume is increasing.
and then that's a function then of how many responded, you know, for the
Correct.
payout on each of those calls, so.
Yes.
So we don't see a significant jump in 2022 of that number, probably very similar to
Right.
2021.
I just didn't know, are we
Well, we kind of
overshooting our 20, are we undershooting a lot? I mean,
Well, we kind of built in.
what are the trend lines looking like on?
I think you mentioned, you know, if it's a longer call, let's say we're going on a structure fire, that's gonna be at least a 4 or 6 hour call. What's the market rate for something like that? You know, do we expect someone to leave work and to get a claim that for 6 hours and paying $10? Are they happy with that? Probably not. We've had a pension in place for a long time for the city, and that's something that's comes through the state, so the state helps fund that. We're not asking for any changes to that. What this would do, keep that 20,000 the same from 2022, but in the event we have a structure fire or some longer event that we're gonna require personnel there to be there for a long time, pay them something closer to market rate per hour. We don't have a lot of these events, but we do have a handful of them every year, where we're asking people to come out of work and go to that scene and be there for an extended period of time.
Plus, we're having staffing problems with nights and weekends and holidays, of course. Recently contacted by the chief of, or Director of Safety, I should say, for Mankato. And they sent me a letter asking for me to share it with the guys, which I've shared it with some, asking for people to sign up to be employed by them as part-time for weekends and holidays. Again, with them receiving that, and that's where those wages came from. That's why we started looking into those wages. So if we're gonna lose any of our guys that we've trained to that on the weekends, because they pay and we don't.
Right.
So that's why we thought we'd try and figure out something to offer them to keep them home.
So taking the wages from here and the calls that you had last year, what's that, does that come out to be the,
So that's an additional buffer, that's about $5,000.
okay, so that's the 25,000.
So that's just figuring, hey, if we had a handful of calls and you were there for 6 hours,
Right.
based on your current, number of personnel that show up, how much would that cost?
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Yeah, I just didn't know whether you could track, how we're gonna do in 2022 with our $20,000 that we've got budgeted. What does that look like? Do we get 24 guys showing up to every call? Some calls you got 8, some you got 12, some you got 15.
Our average is in that 7 to 8 range, but that's something we could definitely get by the next council meeting.
Just to see, because we've got, our current budget, and I think we just first started it this year, right, in 2022. We didn't pay out previously, did we?
We have, yeah.
Have we
Yes.
for calls?
Yes. It was a little less before, because now we've added, our first year, I think it was just for calls.
Goes
And,
back to Aaron Hager.
and then, yes.
Okay.
So it's been around a couple years, I'm not
And-
sure.
And then it was increased to include some compensation for trainings as well. So that's what's driven that number up so far already. But that should have been included in this 20,000 already, the way it is. But yeah, that additional 5,000 is, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You
I was gonna say, that additional 5,000 was, as he explained, if you factor in the 5 calls that we've already had, the 5 fire calls that we've already had, the man hours, at that kind of expense that's projected there, that's where that 5,000 came from, to get from 20 to 25. We'll have to, as Trent said, I'll dig deeper into those numbers. We'll go into Image Trend, which is where we track all of that, and get better numbers for you as far as how close we will get to that as a guesstimation so far this year. But again, that's gonna change with the call volume and basically the time of the day when we get the calls.
Okay.
'Cause that seems to dictate the number of people on the trucks from everybody working out of town.
Yeah, it looks like about the 23, it's about 1,000 hours to pay out for the 25,000,
Yeah.
so right in.
I don't know if you can share this, just to kind of give everybody an idea. When there are calls when people are normally working during the day, are employers pretty good about allowing firefighters to leave? Or do they? Depends on the employer, so it's just,
Some are not.
some don't
Some employees travel, some employees don't, so it just depends on the situation.
right.
I think we
It's
have
tough.
probably all across the board.
Yep.
Yeah, you could use me, for example. My employer allows me to leave if I'm not in the middle of a project, and I'm in the area, then I can leave. Otherwise, but I travel all over southern Minnesota. Some days I'm in Laverne, some days I'm in Worthington. I never know where I'm at, so.
All right, any other questions? Operating supplies, you said that was kind of more stocking the trucks with medical equipment, kind of those incidentals, day-to-day stuff?
Yeah, mostly. Mostly day-to-day stuff is PPE, light PPE, that stuff is
Sure.
included in there as well. Yeah.
Trent, you have a note on the bottom, about the gambling, and there would be a potential to donate 15,000 to the city.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make the city aware, last year, Gambling was able to make a very nice donation, to the city. I think, it's hard to say where that money came from, but I think, there's a lot of stimulus money probably behind that. And it's up and down, every year based on who's in town and who's, using those pull tabs. And just wanted to let the city know that, hey, this year it seems like it's a little slower than it was in the past. So that's a check that always gets written right before the end of the year. I know it's for cash flow situations, that's important to the.
So where does that, is that something that when it's donated, we can then, I mean, the council decides where it goes? I know sometimes it's been donated to the parks or things like that, but is this something that we could
So
push back to
It comes in
them, or-
as part of our revenues to help offset our expenditures, so we factor, so when Trent said 15,000, I put 15,000 on the revenue side in the general fund. That just goes to kind of offset our expenses.
And it's really varied throughout the years. Some years it's been closer to 30, other years it's been a little less than 15.
Okay, so it's not like that money comes in and we can say, hey, let's start that as the 5,000 seed money for them to look at the building.
I mean, you could look at it that way. It's just, yeah.
We do have a line item. I think that there's a general ledger that's gambling money. Carrie, you track that very closely, and you can, I don't know what number is in there, but,
So it's on the very first page of the 2023 revenue. It'd be the 5th page in your packet. All the way down to the bottom, contributions from fire department. So Jennifer's already got 15,000 then plugged in for revenue from, the fire department.
so yeah, we don't know what to expect. If we had to write a check again today, it'd probably be closer to 15,
Right.
not closer to the, it was close to 100 last year that we gave, but just wanted to let them know kind of where that was sitting. And I think that's also in the council packet every month.
Yes,
Yep.
yep,
Yeah,
it
there's a
is.
gambling
Yep,
report in there,
you're
so.
right.
All right, well then I think we can proceed, Jennifer, with the notes you've
Sure.
made. If we start a new capital outlay facilities line item, and we'd start it with 20 and spend probably 20 in 2023 on some of those facility items, the HVAC and the parking lot. But then at least we can start dropping a little bit in there every year to give us some protections. And then we as a council will have to decide if we want to get started on some sort of planning, where that goes. Typically, I think we would probably drop that into general fund professional services.
Yep, yep.
So we could look at adding, some dollars to that line item to get started with something like that. So again, I think as we continue on, we'll kind of let everybody digest all of this then, and if we have other questions, we'll have an additional meeting in September, prior to establishing the preliminary levy. And then we have through the end of the year to finalize things, but I think that would be a good place to start. Anybody else have any other questions or concerns?
All right,
All
thank
right.
you for your time.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
We know we threw a lot at you tonight, so we appreciate your considerations.
That's yours.
All right, next we have the police department request.
So I guess we'll start with, where are we at? Operating supplies, I guess. I put that as a 0% increase. We haven't used a lot this year. However, that varies from year to year because of ammunition purchases. That can be PBT purchases. It can be new flashlight purchases for in the squad cars. New medical bags for in the squad cars, things like that. Fuel, I just put up by 5%, just because I don't know where fuel's gonna go. I hope it goes down, but I don't know that for a fact. Repairs and maintenance, I have a 0% increase on that. We've done fairly well with repairs and maintenance, knock on wood. We haven't had a lot of them. Professional services, I asked for 5% on that because we're coming close to being at 100% for that. Again, something like this would be for our computers, access to like the state systems, the agreement with Blue Earth County for the computers in the squad cars, things like that. Miscellaneous, I left that at 0%. Again, that's kind of community outreach where we get like stickers and things like that for the kids, and we plan at usually end of the year Christmas event with the fire department and try to give back to the community a positive way. Dues and subscriptions, I left that where it's at. That seems to be a pretty good amount. Again, it kind of all depends on how many officers' licenses come due in that particular year. And like Minnesota Crime Prevention Association, dues come out of that, as well as Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association dues. Clothing allowance, I left that where it is. That can be a little tricky because we also included in vests now for the officers, somebody that's hired new. That amount where we pay for the vest comes out of there as well. Meeting and education, I increased that by 5% because with all the new mandates coming down and all the new training that we need, required training, it's increased tenfold from when I first started for what you needed. And so every officer has to have that training every 3 years for their license. And then, do you want me to just go into capital outlay real quick? Capital outlay, pull that out. Basically, the only thing we upped it from last year was to include the majority of it was for the body cameras. I'll back up a second. The body cameras we plan on purchasing hopefully this year. We're waiting for Blue Earth County to decide what kind of cameras they want to put into place because they do our evidence for us, so we want to be compatible with them so it runs smoothly. This $88,155 is the best guesstimate that WatchGuard, or excuse me, Axon could give me, because that is basically it's like a rent-to-own program for 5 years. Otherwise, it comes out to be about $40,000 up front for 5 years. Or it comes out to be $40,000 if you pay it all up front. Where this is more economical to pay it, so much every 5 years, like the $8,000. It's a little easier on the budget. The LiDARs, I don't anticipate replacing them at this point in time. There is money in there to do that, but again, I don't anticipate, they're working fine right now, so. Oh, yes, the LiDARs are different than the radars. They're the handheld lasers that we can pinpoint vehicles on the highway or in town. So if you got multiple vehicles in a normal radar, you'll get varying tones and you'll get different numbers flashing in this high-speed window and the other window. There's no doubt about who you're clocking. It takes the argument out, well, you got the other guy and the other in front of me. Oh, no, we didn't. We got you. So, cameras and squads is one other thing. That's the only other thing that we're planning to replace this year because it's up. We have the money in there to do it. Whether it be Axon or WatchGuard that we go with for our body cameras, they're intertwined so they'll operate together. So the reason why we want to have both the body cameras and the in-car cameras are, for instance, when you're in a pursuit or something, if people are throwing things out the window, you're not going to catch that on your body camera because it's going to be showing the steering wheel. And other things you're not going to catch if you don't have the in-car cameras. So they work consecutively together. So it's a pretty smooth operation. That's about, otherwise, we're just planning for other purchases in the following years, but those are the only three that I anticipated for this year. And again, the LiDAR, they're working fine, so I don't anticipate at this point replacing those, so. I don't know if anybody has questions? Oh, okay. Yeah, let me. So, projections for, I think it was added into the budget, right, Jennifer, for a fourth full-time officer? And I said if we get 4 full-time officers, honestly, there's probably no need for part-time officers because we're not gonna be having them stick around for very long. They're gonna have very, very limited hours at best. So we'd have to train them and put them through all the training, and that'd be an expense to us. The only thing to point out is a couple things with this. The holiday overtime, I just took an average wage of $23.50. Full-time officers get paid 2.5 times their wage to work holidays, which is not unheard of. It's pretty common in the industry. And we have, I think, 11 holidays right now, if I counted them correctly. So you do an 11.5-hour shift, which would only be covering the night shift. It wouldn't be covering the day shift, so that'd be an added expense to cover the day shift. But that would be roughly about $7,500 a year. And then I anticipated regular overtime for like call-outs, some trainings that you aren't going to be able to switch with other people for, court, holdover events, special events like Tater Days, safety fair, bike rodeo when we have them, or the Christmas celebration, things like that, would all, I anticipate, come out of there. So that would be, I guesstimated at about 11,000. If you add those two together, it's about $18,500 basically. That it would, if we only had full-time officers covering the holidays, and again, reiterating, that's only nights. That's not any of the day shifts. And I anticipate that hopefully we'll be able to switch. If we get the 4th full-time officer, we'll be able to switch some things around, but it all kind of depends on the other officers' schedules and things like that, what prior commitments they have, if we can make it work. I'm anticipating we'll be able to, but it could be a tad bit higher if something goes haywire with that. I'm not thinking a lot, but, and right now, we budget in $28,000 for the part-time, so, you save about $90,500 basically if you look at it that way. From if you don't have the part-time budget, you put those towards the overtime budget for the police department. You basically save that amount of money every year. So I guess that's kind of. If anybody has questions, I can go into further detail, but I thought I hit a lot of the topics. But, yeah.
All right, any questions for Chief Cobb?
I got one quick one. So for liability insurance, do we need to have the cameras? Are they required, or
Well,
just suggested?
or which one? It's good to have them, I guess, just because it's hard to, with the culture we're in right now, and unfortunately, officers' words aren't as, as
No,
honored as what they used to be.
I just want to know, because with cybersecurity insurance, you have to have certain things in place or
Right.
they won't write the coverage, right?
Right, and I think you're talking about the redaction, maybe, where you have to redact certain things?
No, it's just that they're required to be on the person, those kind of things, so.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Something to note, I told John, I don't know, they're scheduled to be purchased in 2023, or not purchased, but what our share would be.
Yeah.
But the concern I have is that there's a lot of policy work
There
that
is.
has to be done, so I don't know how long it's gonna take to get all the policies put together and implementation.
Yeah.
To Councilmember Whittington's point, there's a lot of legalities we have to look
Yeah.
into.
Yeah, you have to have a couple public meetings time for the public to give their input and, have the policy in place, which can be kind of time consuming and, a lot of work. So, yeah, there is quite a bit to that.
Well, Jennifer or John, could you look into, as John Whittington said, is there a liability insurance issue without them? Or is there insurance discount with them? You know, is there some sort of, offset or anything that we can look at there?
Sure, I would think the League of Minnesota Cities would be a great resource. We can reach out to them and try to get some more information, bring back.
Any other questions?
I guess I have, the golden question of 4 officers if we need it. Can we do 3 officers full-time? Is that doable? I just got to thinking when I was looking through this, just kind of the if the fourth officer is really needed or not, and can we afford it? That was just a question that I had. With 4 officers, are we able to pay them enough for them to stay here, or is this just a one-stop? I get a full-time experience and then leave. If we stuck with 3, are we able to pay them a little more to where they want to stay here long-term rather than, getting paid average or a little less and then taken off after they get some experience?
It's an interesting point. I'm not going to name names, but it's getting to the point where with departments, they're kind of cutthroat to each other. As far as an officer that I had, I'm not going to name which town or local area, basically offered him another job for $2 more an hour. Well, he decided that at this point he didn't want to do that, which is nice and good, all good. But that's kind of some of the logistics we're dealing with, because officers are in such high demand that if they're starting to steal others from other departments. So can we get by with 3? We did this year. It's a challenge, a little bit of a challenge with the schedule because, but it can be done. What we did when we lost, or if somebody was on vacation this year, we would cover the night shift and be on call during the day. And we would kind of break that up into like a 2 to 2, 2 p.m. to 2 a.m. just to, throw that out there. Split up the day a little bit. So it can be done. But yeah, it's nice for the schedule. In a perfect world where you could get everything you wish for, I guess, it would be nice to, have another officer. So yeah, it can be done, but it would be nice for the schedule.
Did that change for that law enforcement officer happen after or before the wage study?
Did what?
Did that $2 increase happen after or before the wage study? And when the wage study kicked into place, July of 2022, I think.
That was recently.
It was recently. So it's a bidding war, basically, like with the fire department.
And that's just it. The other problem you run into that problem of, do you want to keep the people you have and that you have trained in? You don't want to lose them to other departments, obviously. It is a hit. Like when Officer Romig left, we had to go to we split the shifts a little bit where we didn't have as long a night coverage and we came in a little earlier during the day, so we split it and somebody was on call for that. It works out. We can do it, but ideally it's nice to, to have another one for the schedule. You know, the only other thing would be, I guess, is yeah, it's just a real competitive market right now, so.
So the wage study that we did is now basically inaccurate, I would say, if that's how the market is for police officers and,
Well,
See,
you're
it's
looking at
hard.
cities like Minneapolis needing to hire 100 or 150 officers, and it's just gonna suck
people out of here,
every,
other places.
and so you're seeing it happen across the state. Morris, Minnesota just disbanded their police department. Spring Grove, I think, is just disbanding theirs. That's what you're gonna start to see is towns our size won't have a police department. There's not gonna be enough officers, we'll shut them down and.
That's kind of where I'm getting at is, does it make sense to have less and pay them well to stay here? Or, you know, instead of keep adding more and more officers that we can afford?
Well, let me ask the council a question. As John said, when Ben left, we changed the schedule of the police department. I'd like to know if anybody noticed that we only had coverage from 2 p.m. in the afternoon to 2 a.m. in the nighttime. Did anybody notice?
I noticed it on paper, but I wouldn't say that there, did the community notice? I guess it'd be.
Yeah,
'cause I mean, I
have we
was-
gotten any
I'm
feedback?
working, so.
Well, I mean, just from going, you know, they're like, oh, you know, I haven't seen you for a while, or, you know, where have you been, or, you know, because people that work mornings or whatever, and they're used to seeing me in the morning coming in or around, and, or at calls, you know, firemen comment, you know, like, you know, we missed you this morning, or, you know, and
So maybe it would be good to see some data, and if you can look back to, it was a month, I think, where we had that schedule, to see how many call-outs we had in normally covered times. I suppose it'd be from 7 a.m. to
7:30.
2 p.m.
Yeah, 7:30 to 2.
Just to see if we see, well, hey, maybe we can get by with a 12-hour coverage period. Maybe that fluctuates a little bit.
If I remember when we looked at those sheets, I think most of the calls are, there's a dead zone between, you know, like 3 to
Right.
5 in the morning and stuff. But I think most of the calls were, I think that prime time, 2 to 2, is when you want your coverage.
Yeah.
Minus the fact that you're missing the crossing guard duty at the school, which
Well, yeah.
personally, I don't really, I mean,
At that point, I'd rather look at, do we need, is there someone that's retired, or can we talk to the school district?
Yeah,
you know,
there's a
stuff.
budget
There's
in
no-
there.
Right.
We offered that for many years, and then our crossing guard decided he couldn't do it anymore, and then it disappeared because we couldn't find anybody else.
You know, it's nice though, I mean, for being there in the mornings for the kids, for school, it's nice because you build relationships with the kids. I mean, a lot of the kids know me by name and they'll wave and say hi and, I mean, have me autograph their yearbooks at the end of the year because it's a big deal, you know. I think you miss that community interaction as well if you only do the,
but with 3 officers, you'd be able to do that just fine
Yeah.
still.
Well, we'd be looking at the 2 p.m. to 2 a.m. coverage time, so.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe, John, can we ask you to bring us some data on what the call-outs
you know,
looked like during that time? Did that
it would increase.
hinder our coverage? And then, I mean, yeah, because it's a pretty sizable chunk if we stayed with 3 officers. You know, obviously, then it'd be nice to have a part-timer to fill in when certain ones needed time off, but.
You know, and that's just the thing too, just not to, but with 3 full-time officers, we currently are back at doing the 11.5-hour shifts at night and the 8.5-hour shifts during the day is where we're at right now with 3 officers. When we did the 2 to 2s, we were down to 2.
So with where we're at right now, there will be school time coverage starting when school starts
Right.
with the 3 full-time.
With
I guess
two
that's my
full-time, it was
concern,
two.
The fire department's made note of it, and I think anybody that's in any business higher up that's trying to hire, you know your employees are getting stole from. I mean, it is cutthroat. They're going after. So that's, we've had this conversation a month or two ago when we talked about 3 officers or 4 officers, and I think we were all on board with the 4th. But, you know, Anthony does bring a good point where it's only a matter of time where they're gonna come after our officers again and say, hey, I'll give you $3 more, $4 more, what's it gonna take to get you? And they're gonna finally just leave, you know, so even if it means we have to be in the higher spectrum, do we need to be there in that more medium ground to all the the neighboring departments to either keep the force, or we might get ourselves in a pinch where now we go back down to 2 and then down to 1 and now we don't have them because we can't hire. I mean, are we gonna even be able to hire a 4th officer?
Yeah, well, and the interesting point with the fire department too, with calls, besides Mankato, Eagle Lake is now the 2nd biggest city in Blue Earth County. And we also have the 2nd highest ICR count, which are calls, traffic stops, anything like that. We have besides Mankato and Blue Earth County, we're the 2nd highest for cities of call volume. So
Calls correlate with population, basically.
basically.
Right.
I think you guys are right. Can we have 3 well-paid officers and we're not having a revolving door, we're not having to pay onboarding costs for new employees, probably what, 15 grand or more every time you bring on a new officer?
With training and
With
vests
training
and uniforms and
getting them up to speed and things like that, so.
Well, and I'm not talking $5 more than the next town. I'm just talking, maybe $1 or $2 more. Just to sustain them here, I think is more viable than a 4th officer that who knows how long he's gonna be here for. That's just my thought.
When I think when we looked at the wage study across the board, Eagle Lake was on the low median of, or the average of all the surrounding communities. Can we bring it up to more of that medium ground so that it isn't appealing to leave or not come? If one officer leaves, they can still word them out. There was a great community. I just moved up to the cities instead, or whatever. They didn't move because of pay. They moved because they moved, or they changed jobs because they moved. Which I know it's a work in progress, but.
I'm one of the silly ones. I've been here for over 20 years. I love it, so I stay. But, and I can't complain. I like it. And I think we have officers right now that want to be here. But like you say, I don't want to lose any of them either.
Right. I mean, what's the likelihood of even hiring a 4th officer right now? I mean, I know all it takes is one application, but.
Wasn't every department across the state of Minnesota and sheriff's department, there's an open position pretty much everywhere?
Yeah,
Right.
any one time, the highest I've seen was 105 postings on the post board. And then a lot of those had multiple positions. Those departments had multiple positions that they were hiring for. So it's like, wow, I've never seen that happen in all my years. I've never seen it like this.
John, a question for you. You mentioned vests. You're talking bulletproof vests.
Yes.
So when officers leave service, do they return that equipment to the city?
Not the vest, because it's fitted for that person. So it's not really safe what we'll do until they get their vest, officers will give their old vest to us, and we'll just, for the time being, something's better than nothing, but they're custom fit to the officer, so they offer the most protection.
What about weapons, holsters, belts?
Weapons do come back. Holsters come back. Mag pouches come back. The other stuff, it doesn't come back. We do have something set up, and I can't remember. I think it's if an officer leaves within a year, I think, of being hired. Is that right? So much of it's prorated. So.
Well, so then, would the council like to see any additional call information in regard to a 3-officer lighter coverage schedule? So we can kind of weigh that for officer versus 3. Yeah, and if you want to do some digging on your own, take a look at the League of Minnesota Cities website. You can see jobs posted there. Most of them, I think, full-time officers are salaried. And you can kind of see what the offers are out there. And most of them are, larger metropolitan communities, but it's quite interesting. All right, any other questions for police? All right, let's move on to Public Works.
All right, for the streets, operating supplies in the streets, we kept the same. We're pretty low on that end. Fuel, we left the same. Kind of uncertain if we may go over, may not, depending on where fuel's at. But we're on the low end, we're 40%. Repair and maintenance and supplies, we left that at 7,000. Street repair, general maintenance for all of our blacktop patching and curb repairs that we do, we dropped that down by 15%. In the last few years, we just haven't hit that 115,000 mark, so we dropped that down 15,000. Our professional services, we haven't really used any of it. We'd like to see in the near future doing some tree trimming on some of the boulevard trees and having some of that contracted out where fire trucks and plow trucks and stuff are hitting them. Miscellaneous, we took that out. There hasn't been any past years that we've used money out of there. The capital outlay actual expense, we put 11,000 in there. That's part of the portion for a F-250 that was projected to be purchased last year in the capital outlay, and the scheduling for ordering that just didn't play out.
Can I interrupt you really quick? Sorry, I had an email from a resident who's watching the live stream and can't hear us, like all of us, so just a reminder to everybody, sorry to interrupt you, Andrew, all of us speak really close into our microphone. Sometimes we forget there's people watching remotely, so thank you.
So we put that in the capital outlay expense for this year. There's like a 2-week window where we can order a truck, which is in October now. It was September and they pushed it out to October, so, and they're leery about October even. The capital outlay for sidewalks, we increased that by 25%. There's just a lot of sidewalks that we're trying to get covered with all the boulevard trees, destroying them and stuff like that, where we thought the 15,000 wasn't quite enough to complete that in a timely manner. And then on to parks. Operating supplies, we left the same. The fuel budget, we cut that a little bit. There's not a whole lot of fuel expense for parks other than lawnmowers mainly. Repair and maintenance, we increased that by 2%. Everything for, a lot of that's for our lawnmowers and things like that, and everything keeps getting more expensive. Professional services, we use a lot of that for the tree trimming and tree removal in the parks. We increased that by 18% just to help with the emerald ash borer management and other trees and stuff like that. The clothing allowance, we left the same. Meeting and education, there isn't a whole lot of parks, meetings, and education classes that we can take, so we took that out of the budget. Capital outlay, we put in for 11,000 to divide up for the F-250 again. Stormwater drainage, operating supplies, we increased that by 10%, just to give us a little bit more coverage with this MS4 stuff that we're coming into. Fuel, we increased by 10% with the new leaf vac, and MS4 stuff we project will be using a little more fuel. Repair and maintenance, we left the same. With the new leaf vac, hopefully there won't be a whole lot of repairs. Professional services, that's where we would take out some of the like actual stormwater, manhole or catch basin repairs. We left that the same. Clothing allowance, we left the same. Meeting and education, we increased to $2,000 for the MS4 classes and things that we need to take. I did the math and I think it's roughly $600 a person to be trained in for the MS4. And then the capital outlay expense, we put 11,000 in for the F-250. And then when we talk about selling the old leaf vac, we wanted to roll that back into our capital outlay for stormwater. Then we're on to the water department. Operating supplies for the water department, we left at 40,000. Fuel, we're over budget this year just from a little bit of miscommunication on how much was in the budget. So we left that the same because there's some that we could have taken out of sewer that we took out of water instead. Repair and maintenance, we left the same. The professional services, we left at 30,000, and that could be when we were talking about the hydrant stuff, we could take some of that out of there to get those nozzles replaced. Meeting and education, we left the same, with potentially a new person coming on board. The training expense and classes is pretty costly on that, so. And then the capital outlay expense, for the F-250 again, we kind of just divide that out equally. I think we're on to sewer. Operating supplies for sewer, we left roughly the same. I think a lot of the beginning part of taking out was some of that degreaser and stuff that we recoup and don't need now with the bubbler that we put in the lift station. Fuel, we left the same. Repair and maintenance, we left the same. And then the professional services, we increased by 10%, and that's where our like sewer cleaning and pump repair and annual inspection comes from. And I think last year, I think there was some, or this year, there was some extra costs for engineering out of that as well. Then meeting and education, we left the same to help support a new employee. And the capital outlay, we increased to 11,000 to help with the F-250. And then for our capital outlay plan, the only thing really projected this year is the F-250. And then next year, looking forward, like the skid loader and the Ranger that we have currently is what the F-150 on the bottom is for.
Does anyone have any questions for Andrew? I guess I have a question in regard to the capital outlay for each of the various departments, actual, the 11,000.
Yep.
Am I misunderstanding? Oh, no, I lost my page. So we've already got dollars into that line. So the F-250 is what you're talking about, the 11,000?
Correct, yep.
So right now, we currently have 51,000 in that account?
In,
We talked about that, Andrew and Brian and I, when we met to review the requests, we talked about we already have the funds available. We've been setting aside in the general fund in the street. But then we talked about we need to start moving to the direction of splitting up the costs so that it hits each of the different departments. So we kind of talked about, do we do it this year? When do we start this? And so that's where the decision was made. Let's start splitting it now. That way we can really get a true picture of what our different departments or funds are costing us.
Okay.
If that answers your question.
Well, I'm just wondering if we're double dipping.
Well, the unused funds and from the capital outlay, from the street will just go back into it and can be reallocated to other line items.
Because the line underneath is the capital outlay set aside, so that's, should be the total for our 2023 set asides, which would be $73,553. I guess I didn't look in your,
If you're
Yes.
looking at, sorry, Mayor.
I'm looking at your page 4, expenditures. For streets, capital outlay set aside, 73,553. So that totals the entire 2023 Public Works Department list. And then we have some for parks.
Yep.
So
And
I'm just thinking the 11,000 in each department is over and above what we're already setting aside.
So I think what the Public Works Department is trying to do is they're taking what would be our actual expense for the F-250, and they wanted to divide it between the 5 departments. And so, as I explained to them, right now we have it broken out, just coming out of the general. But when you see that 73,553, that's taking the items, if you look at for set aside, then for the other needs coming up, like the F-250 2020 plow truck. Because this kind of came in at the last minute, I had already, so we can do it however you want. We don't have to divide it between the 5 departments this year. We can start doing that, in the future. But that was just kind of a discussion we had, and so.
Well, that's all fine. So basically, what you're saying is that on your page 4, expenditures, the capital outlay set aside for streets for the 2023 budget is $73,553.
Yep.
But then we have this actual expense right above it, 11,000. And that's basically money that we've already saved to purchase that truck, so it,
Yep.
see, I've always fought this. It's not an expenditure in my mind that's
So-
coming out of 2023 budget. You've actually increased $44,000, our 2023 budget. And so it's gonna set our levy rate off and,
So I've asked that question a couple different times with our auditors, and they said, but you have to have it on the expenditure side. So that's where When you look at the total of your expenditures, I think we need to always note that, you know, these are capital, we're drawing down our reserves. So our levy might be going, or our total expenditures might be, look higher, but we're just drawing down our actual money that's been set aside already. And I'm with you 100%. It throws me off too, and I have talked to the auditors a couple different times, but they've always said you have to have, there really is no other better way that they propose that we do it.
Right, so if I go back to kind of your initial thing on what our expenses are,
Right.
bottom line, so second page of your memo, general fund expenditures, $1,917,456. In my mind, that's inflated by $44,000. Because we've added that 11,000 per street, water, sewer, parks, but we've already
Well-
saved for it 5 years ago, you know, so we're actually much, much closer to bang on balanced budget.
Yep. And so what we've called that is planned deficit spending, where we're just spending down our reserves that have been set aside for capital outlay, right?
So that was my only question, I just didn't know where
We'll work on it and we'll come back with maybe.
like, we're budgeting for the 11,000, but we're spending the 11,000 that we've already saved. You know, so then, to me, in my mind, if we do it that way, we should have in our revenue $44,000 from reserves as a revenue line item for everything that we're spending out that we've already saved. We're just taking it out of our savings account and putting it into our general account. Does that make sense to everybody else, or is it just me?
I can talk to the auditors again and see if they have a better way for us.
They don't like to do it the way I like to do it, though.
I know.
All right, any other questions for Andrew? I'm sorry about that, I just was wondering where that's all going. Andrew, question for you that I had. So, you know, in this budget, we're talking about a fourth full-time Public Works employee. And a number of the items that we have, you know, professional services, you mentioned tree trimming and things like that. In your opinion, is it in the job description, skills available? Is it something that our public works employees should be doing, is cutting down trees? I mean, should that be a part of a public works approach in a city?
What we try to do is, you know, as much as we can, so like the low-hanging branches and, you know, trees that are kind of more in open areas, what we hire out for is more of the, like, bucket truck tree trimming and, falling trees that are in more sensitive areas, like around playground equipment and things like that, or, you know, in a vast array of trees where, you know, it's a little more difficult and, you know, it's safer to just have them do it than have us do it with, you know, maybe a little less experience.
Yeah, I noticed, I mean, do we have chainsaws?
Yes, yep.
Do we have any other equipment that would work for, I mean, you know, we've got bobcats and
Right, yep.
trailers and whatnot, we can haul wood away. Somebody went through the park and cleaned it up. I noticed that there was all sorts of tree trimming done. I'm assuming that was your
Yeah,
department.
yep.
And then it was poof, it was all gone and cleaned up and looked nice. I'm just wondering, you know, it feels to me like our public works department sometimes gets into a hire it out, hire it out, hire it out mentality, where I look at other public works departments and they're physically doing all of these things in-house.
Right.
And I'm, you know, I guess I just don't know, like if I go to North Mankato, it seems like 120 public works employees, and they've got this and that, and, I mean, they're paving, they're doing all sorts of things. You know, are we doing too little as our department? Should we be expanding our skills and capabilities? And, I mean, if we're looking for a fourth full-timer, is this something that we should be looking for as far as, you know, what are we looking for? Obviously, somebody that can run a plow truck, and, you know, what other skills and things are we looking for? I don't know, maybe it's putting you on the spot, but, you know, I'm just looking at, you know, you mentioned tree trimming and things for a lot of our professional services. I'm wondering whether that could be in-house.
Right, and a lot of it could be, you know, granted, we had another full-time employee or, you know, more help, whether it be full-time or part-time, to try to accomplish some of these. Like this year, especially with all the MS4 stuff, you know, we're really backlogged.
Right.
Trying to figure out all this MS4 stuff and keep up on all of our mowing. And then we just lost another part-time mower, so, you know, now we're really shorthanded almost. But yes, we could be doing a lot more of, you know, the tree trimming. I mean, we could keep somebody employed year-round.
Well, it just
doing
seems
that.
like we've expanded our equipment list, you know, over the years. The councils, you know, really haven't been opposed to bringing on equipment, you know, and so
Right.
I guess in my opinion, I'm assuming you have everything you need to do things, but then it seems like we hire out lots of things, you know, because maybe we just got a new leaf vac, you know, to expand our capabilities, and, you know, so the council's always been kind of interested in that. And I'm just wondering if we bring on another person, are we looking at kind of expanding how we operate?
Yeah,
You know.
absolutely, yes.
And Andrew, when we just talked about this when we were reviewing the budget request, and Andrew made that exact point that if we could bring on a fourth person, we could be doing this and this that we're so far behind on. So I think they just need to get organized, and, you know, they're always being pulled in different directions. This MS4 has been a beast to deal with, and
Okay.
I know that they can fill and find enough work for that fourth full-time person to do,
Right.
without a doubt.
And just to piggyback too, you know, I would just like to see us take care of our own things as far as like baseball fields, softball fields. I just don't understand, or, you know, why MABA has to come take care of it. I think that's something that most of the people of our city see. And, you know, to be quite honest, I'm sure you know too, it just isn't up to snuff in my opinion. Whether that's extra help or whatever it is. It's just little things like that go a long way, in my opinion. Same thing with like tree trimming. I get we don't have a bucket truck, but there's times where maybe you can rent one. That would be much cheaper than hiring it out. I know Brian was talking about hiring out, painting the rink. That to me is kind of a puzzler. It kind of piggybacking on what Mayor Tim was saying, there's just a lot of things on the list that I feel like we should be doing and not hiring out. And I guess in the future, especially if we get an extra person, then that has to happen, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, as far as those things, it's kind of normal for a grounds crew to be doing that,
Right.
that we're hiring out. So I kind of agree with Tim on that one as well.
I think my only comment is, or I guess I have a couple questions too, but regarding your guys' comments is, I disagree a little bit with the MABA, us taking care of it, because MABA, the agreement we have between the two, they do a lot of work that we wouldn't be able to do, you know, and the agreement that's within there, they help for, you know, they give, their funds are through helping make sure the field is great, so instead of cash being flown, from what I understand, but I feel like we're having to hire a lot out because we don't have the staffing to do it in-house. We can't trim trees, hence why the budget's still where it's at, because we haven't had the resources to be able to do it year over year over year. So if we're not having the resources to do things internally year after year after year, to me, it's either inefficiency within the department or just not enough people in the department. And being on the park board, I'm seeing more of the lack of resources within the department, not enough people, turnover. I mean, $11 an hour to come mow, not very many people are gonna do that. So trying, you know, like the police department, we're saying, hey, we need to increase their wages. Put the word out, people, we gotta try and find a new lawnmower, someone to, mow lawn for $11 an hour. Who's gonna come in and do that? So I think we need to look at someone that's gonna be able to help these guys, and I said it, I think 2 years ago, that we need more full-time public works people so that we can do it in-house, but they can't physically do it with what they have, in my opinion. But my other two questions would be, with the sidewalks, we're having a lot of sidewalk repairs because of boulevard trees. Can some of these trees just go away? If they're continually cars are hitting them because they're not being trimmed up, but, you know, John, I think there's some over by your house that you have to go in the oncoming lane to miss the trees.
Yep, definitely.
You know, so we're having the mass amount of boulevard trees that are in Eagle Lake that the residents say, it's not my problem, it's a city tree. The city's saying, it's not my problem, it's a resident's tree, so no one's taking any responsibility for it. So I think there's the education there, but then where they're at with sidewalks, and people are ducking under them, or, you know, last year we had someone taking care of them, you know, a walker that took care of it themselves and they got bashed on, you know, so at what point are these trees, they shouldn't have been there, or they're dead and should be gone, or they're destroying the sidewalk so much that they shouldn't be there. Then instead of trimming it, they go. You know, what's that leeway? My other thing would be related to the MS4, because I've been seeing a lot of reimbursements on personal credit cards that are having to come out with some of that stuff. Can there be a better way that the city handles that so training isn't always on personal credit cards? Because I feel like that's going to continue and probably even get worse. Well, any department has to go and do an online training, and you're having to put a credit card in to do the training. So how can we handle that in the future so it's not always going on, especially one person's card, and they're not getting reimbursed for a year or for a month or 2 months? So kind of a load of questions there.
I can answer the thing about the credit card. We sure could. I've worked in cities that have a credit card and cities that don't, and it is kind of, we just have to get some policy set up, and then I think to set up the credit card, we'd have to have employees willing to give their personal information, like social security numbers, and so sometimes those are drawbacks that we maybe kind of shied away from. It's not worth it. But we sure can look into it again and see.
But I think then if they don't want to
possible.
give that information, then they should put it on their card, and they should be personally getting, reimbursed versus it all going to Jennifer, to John, or something, someone that way. You either share that information so you're not paying for it, or you pay for it and get reimbursed.
Okay.
In my mind, anyways, because I wouldn't want to have to continually be paying for someone else's training.
Yeah, I feel like we tried to get a city credit card once, didn't we?
That might have been before I started working. Was it kind of the same reasons, Carrie, that,
We did have a city credit card before, and it was under a staff person's social security number, so they're ultimately liable for any charges on it.
and then staff turnover, they leave, and
Yep.
It's usually the city administrator, or the deputy city clerk. They have to give their information, so.
Yeah, and then to go back on the trees, the boulevard trees, I mean, the problem with it is they're getting so big and so many that where do we start and where do we stop kind of deal. Eventually they're gonna be wrecking the curb just as bad as they are the sidewalk. Right now, like this year, our contractor, they just cut the roots to get this, where we replace the sidewalk next to them. They cut the roots out so that, we could put the sidewalk back to its normal elevation. But in the long run, it's gonna cost us probably more to have them do that than it would be to maybe look at taking some of them out.
Well, then, do we look at also new developments? So we have Fox Meadows. What, do we change our policy for how we plant boulevard trees? 0 boulevard trees, plant trees on, properties? I don't know if we have.
I think you have to. I think anybody that walks or drives and they have boulevard trees, they're a nuisance to almost everybody, unless they're trimmed up properly.
Right.
And especially the ones that get put in before someone moves in, it's whose tree is it, and then no one is taking care of them. And maybe that's part of the whole thing, is the education to them that these are your trees to take care of, but then a lot of them don't know how to do it or have the resources to do it, so they don't care. But I think there has to be some sort of policy in place where it has to be so far back from any right-of-ways or sidewalks or whatever, so that we don't have these continual issues.
And
Well,
I think each development has done it differently. I know certain developments, the boulevard trees right on the property line, and other developments, I know in my parents' development, the city gave each homeowner 3 free trees. You know, and then they were able to put one in the backyard, because it was on a cul-de-sac lot. I mean, I think the idea of boulevard trees and trees are good. Maybe that was all part of the Tree City USA too, possibly 20 years ago, Tim? Does that sound right?
Yeah, we were a Tree City for some time, but, and as you say, it might have been,
It was an incentive. I
Yeah.
remember it was some sort of an incentive to, because the trees that are causing problems are primarily down on LeSueur Avenue and Thomas Drive. All those trees that were planted like 20 years ago, I think, Rockwell, Creekside. The ones up here, I'm surprised still lived, because there was virtually no houses out there for a long time.
well,
I
if
think
we're
the
gonna
trees
do a
are good.
boulevard tree, you know, like we have on Parkway, it's gotta be something with a smaller footprint, you know, so we have ash trees and whatever, and they get very large.
Well, I
My
think the-
maples are just the scrawniest looking things. I don't have to cut anything because I can't get them to grow.
Well, but like over by our house, there's a bus stop and someone, the resident or the homeowner put evergreens. And they're already coming over the sidewalk and the
Right.
bus stop
Peop-
is there, no one
Yeah,
can see them. So I
people
mean,
don't know how to plant trees is the
No.
problem.
Right.
You know, I mean, people, oh, I'm gonna plant a maple tree 5 feet from the curb. Oh, well, it's going to grow to be at least 50 feet tall with a huge root system, you know, so that we probably should have to have something in terms of a policy with boulevard trees if they're gonna be continually ruining our sidewalks, which they are.
Right. Well, and like a lot of these ones on Creekside and stuff, there's only a 2-foot section of boulevard that they're in, maybe 3 foot. It's not very wide for, you know, a big maple to be in.
Jennifer, do we have any money in the budget for another?
Oh, community forestry person?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so I have been, I held off on applying for another one because I was kind of trying to come up with a list of projects to do in addition to kind of what we've done, the last 2 years and feedback I've gotten from the forestry member, and I sure can apply for another one, and it doesn't cost us anything. The only thing it costs really is my time to supervise and meet with them, and then public works. So I can sure apply for another one, and maybe that's something they could help us with is a,
Either that or maybe we
Putting some
look at a
policies.
professional forester that can assess. I
Okay.
don't know, sometimes the AmeriCorps people are not experts necessarily in the field, you know, they're trying to learn and do their things, but maybe it has to be a forester that
okay.
can at least give us, you know, this tree is gonna grow to be such and such, and the root ball is gonna get out here 40 feet, and, yeah, and if it is
Well, the root
Do we-
system usually goes as
should be
big
the
as
same as the
canopy.
canopy, and so maybe that's something to kind of keep our eyes on then, and if we do, you know, take some down, you know, our, ultimately, you know, trees are energy efficiency things if they're planted in the right spot by a home, so, you know, maybe we could do some incentives where, hey, we're taking this boulevard tree out, but we'll offer you another tree. Yeah.
I gotta think the cost to remove the tree is about the same as the cost to fix the sidewalk or the
Oh,
curb
yeah.
or the street, you know? Especially when you drive down the sewer and see how much new sidewalk had to get put in.
And then you talk about, you know, the root balls getting into the sewer system and things like that, that are added costs that people don't usually see in that.
Right.
All right, any other questions for Andrew then? I think you get the gold star tonight for most line items of reducing costs, so that's good. All right, well then let's move on. Jennifer, I'll let you give kind of a recap, summary.
Sounds good. So I'm gonna scroll down to, I'll kind of try to keep up with this on here. I have some information I just want to share, and I know it looks daunting. You guys have been here for 2 hours, but I'll try to get through here as quick as I can. So I just wanted to kind of start off by, talking about our community is experiencing growth, and there's growing pains and pressures that accompany growth, and so I feel like we're faced with, an even more difficult task this budget cycle with putting together a fiscally prudent budget that ensures both the continued delivery of quality services and then also planning for the future. As you all know, right now our economy is pretty volatile and inflation is high, so those are some factors that are making this budget cycle difficult. I just wanted to note that Eagle Lake's population has grown approximately 36% in the last decade, while our staffing levels have remained relatively the same, even though the demand for services has increased because of development. And as we've already talked about tonight, included in this year's budget requests are a 4th full-time police officer, a 4th full-time public works worker, and then this is new, it hasn't been discussed tonight, I'm requesting a full-time community development coordinator position. And then attached to my memo is a draft job description for the position of community development coordinator. Eagle Lake is also behind on updating some key planning documents, such as our comprehensive plan that was adopted in 1991 and our land use plan, which was adopted in 2006. Both of these documents are important for strategic planning as it relates to community development. So I did put in some funding in the budget for professional services, but that's why I wanted to know funding should be prioritized to update our planning documents. And then with the upcoming retirement of our public works director, city staff recommends that Bolton & Mink be consultant to assist with putting together an updated capital improvement plan as it relates to street and utility reconstruction projects. And then including the CIP could be other infrastructure needs such as proposed water treatment plant project, street pavement evaluation and mapping. Right now this is currently being done in-house and as time allows. And as Andrew alluded to in his report, I think they're just not having enough time to get out and do the measurements and evaluation of the streets. So maybe that's something that Bolton & Mink could help us with. And then also asking Bolton & Mink to take a review of our sewer televising records to identify problem areas around town, try to be more proactive if we could. And then coming up this fall, I just wanted to know what, while it's not included in the budget per se, bidding will take place for the SCADA system for water and sewer that we talked about at a recent meeting. And it's estimated that the system could cost around $175,000. Then in December, January, bidding is anticipated to take place for the water tower rehab project in 2023. This is for both the interior and exterior of the water tower. And then we can get into a lot more with the water tower, but and maybe I should just save that for another time. It could be offline for 12 weeks. It's gonna be a big process. We'll get into all those details later. And then I just wanted to note that the American Rescue Plan funds, we know can be used for the SCADA system. I'm still doing research to see if any of that funding that's left over could be applied towards the water tower rehab project. And what we received in total for ARPA funding is $337,354, and we must expend those funds by December 31st of 2024. It seemed like a far off date a couple of years ago, but it's coming sooner than we would think. And then next, I just included some basic information about the budgeting process. We are required as a city to prepare and adopt a proposed budget and proposed property tax levy each year. By law in Minnesota, the fiscal year of a city and all of its funds are calendar year, so it's January 1st to December 31st. And a budget is basically 1 year of estimated revenues coming in and expenditures, money going out. Some people have asked me questions about the budget process and when input can be provided, and so this next part I'll cover here talks about the truth in taxation process. So we have a truth in taxation hearing that'll be coming up, and that allows for public comment. And that hearing will have to take place sometime between November 25th and December 28th. And then the final levy has to be certified to the county auditor by or before December 28th. And then we have to file a certificate of compliance with the Department of Revenue by that same deadline. This doesn't really apply to the council, it's just something on administration side. There was a new change with the 2021 legislative session requiring additional summary budget information that we have to submit to the county auditor. So that's just a little bit more reporting work that we have to do. And then last year, the final levy was set at 10% or an increase of $81,173. And unless a property's valuation increase, their property taxes should have remained relatively flat. So just as I bolded it here, it's important to note the preliminary levy can be reduced once adopted, but cannot be increased prior to the final levy being adopted. So once you certify the preliminary levy on or before September 30th, we cannot go backwards. We can only, or we cannot go higher, we can only go backwards and lower it. So in the table then that you'll see, there's just a summary kind of showing you 2021, 2022, and 2023 preliminary. Based on the information that was put into the budget that you have in front of you tonight, it would increase the general fund from $69,690. EDA, there's no increase. Debt service, under $10,000. And so our total tax levy increase would be about 8.6%. But it's very important to keep in mind that doesn't mean that people's taxes are going to go up automatically 8.6% because our net tax capacity is increasing with more residential and commercial development. So our tax base has grown, and it largely depends on a property's valuation, whether or not they've had a valuation increase. And then basically proposed 2023 general fund revenues, we're showing $1.866 $32, and then proposed general fund expenditures $1,917,456, and as shown, there's a difference of $51,424, and that's where I know planned deficit spending. The budget would be balanced except for planned capital outlay expenditures, drawing down previously set aside funding in the general fund reserves. And then, just real quickly, I'm gonna talk about the net tax capacity. I know this is, it kind of gets to be a lot of information, but there's a lot of parts that go into a budget. So there's a spreadsheet that is used to show estimated net tax capacity and levy impact, and then we can plug in different percentages and show different scenarios with how the levy percentage changes and then the tax rate. I did talk to Blue Earth County Property and Land Staff, and they said the average residential sale price in the city of Eagle Lake was $300,100 for the 2022 assessment, and the average market value increase on residential homes was 8.44%. So it just want to note that the city's net tax capacity has increased recently due to new residential and commercial construction. And this is important because with more taxpayers, the tax base has expanded and helps to spread the burden of taxes over more taxpayers. So I'll get to that spreadsheet later. And then also included is a tax levy history. And then I already mentioned the truth in taxation hearings. We'll send notices to all property owners, or the county will, each November. And the truth in taxation meeting right now is set for Monday, December 5th at 6 p.m. And that's an opportunity for residents to ask questions and provide input. As far as fund balance, the city consistently maintains a minimum unassigned general fund balance of 50% of the annual budget. This is important because we want to have a positive fund balance, and that contributes to a favorable bond rating, provides a source of working capital to meet our cash flow needs, and offers a cushion if we have any unexpected expenditures or revenue shortfalls. And you've already seen fire, police, and public works budget requests. So let's get past that part. And then next is our certified 2023 local government aid. As you can see, it increased from the 2022 amount by just under $14,000. Between LGA and property taxes, that accounts for approximately 80% of our general fund revenue. So when you hear us talk about LGA, it's a very important component to cities and being able to make our budgets work. It's a large share of our revenues, and we get that paid out in two payments, July 20th and December 26th of each year. Next, we'll move on to cost of living adjustment. Each year, a cost of living adjustment is made to wages using the Consumer Price Index. This is intended to counteract inflation and the average change over time in prices by consumers for goods and services. We talked about in 2021 that the city does retain the discretion to determine what that actual adjustment's gonna be, not just using the amount that's on the Midwest CPI region showing from June to June. This year, if we did that, it would be at 9.5%. Last year was at 5.9%. The year before that, it was 0.7%. I did talk to some other cities, and most are budgeting anywhere from 3 to 5%. So I plugged in a 3% cost of living into the 2023 budget. And then step increase for those employees that are eligible to receive a step increase, that's 2%. And employees at the top of the range, they only receive a cost of living adjustment. We won't know our health insurance rates for sure until October. After talking with our agent, he recommended we just budget a little bit on the higher side and put in 12% for an increase, although he's optimistic and hopes that it will be under 10%. And then the next is just for reference purposes. I just included the Public Employees Retirement Association, the employer and employee contribution amounts, Social Security, Medicare withholding. None of these have changed from the prior year. And then just kind of a summary next on some of our dues. So League of Minnesota Cities dues, there's a slight increase. Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities dues, again, another slight increase, about 3%, I believe. Minnesota Valley Council of Governments, no increase. RETA, I've been told I don't think there will be an increase. We're just gonna plug in what we had last year. And then I put in the All Seasons Arena Operating Assessment, and I made a notation that if the operating service agreement is fulfilled through 2023, the city's share is $1,810. And this is a 0% increase from last year's assessment amount. Music on Parkway, as you know, we had a grant in 2021, and then the city set aside some funding in 2022. We planned a scaled back music series, and then we had a business that's not a business. The American Legion stepped up and gave a generous donation, so we were able to have 3 events. So right now I plugged in another $5,000 for 2023 in hopes that we can get donations or grants for the other $5,000. Parks, Park has been requesting the last few years a higher allocation to keep up with some of our ongoing park capital outlay needs as far as playground equipment. We need a new pavilion, upgrades to the bathroom. So we put another $50,000. And then next I have our audit fees just to show you where we're at for just a slight increase, about $1,000 for audit. And then next we have the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust coverage, and they kind of give some estimates. We don't have the exact amounts right now, but just giving us some forecasting on where we want to start budgeting some funds. And then let's see, capital improvements, we've covered that. Debt service, I've got a copy of the debt service schedule in your budget materials. Utility rate analysis, I'm working with Shannon Sweeney to review our water, sewer, and storm utility expenditures to make sure that our rates are in line with what we need to be able to operate those utilities. Especially with the storm utility, we haven't increased rates for quite some time, and as Andrew alluded to earlier, we have some pretty heavy demands with MS4, and so that's something we really need to start looking at. And then when we have a 4th full-time public works employee, part of their wages will need to be allocated to stormwater, so that you'll see an increase in the wages for that. And then I just have a little notation about copier. Been working with a sales rep on getting a different copier, setting up a new lease agreement that would actually probably help us save quite a bit in our monthly costs for copying. So I will bring that to you at the September 12th meeting, but that should help pretty significantly on our monthly costs. So more information to follow on that. And then I did make a note that, you know, the enterprise funds I do have filled out, but as I work with, you know, Shannon Sweeney and different things that we need to look at for enterprise fund, those things could get changed, and that really doesn't matter if we make changes between now and when the budget's set. It does not impact the general fund levy. And then, lastly here, or second to last, we need to schedule a budget work session sometime to, review things again before we, get to being ready to certify the preliminary tax levy. And then finally, I have on a list here, I think that it would be helpful if the council would look at putting together some immediate and long-term goals, that we could compile, and I think that'll help as we look at making some difficult decisions on where we go with some of the different budget requests. If we just maybe take a few minutes and at the next meeting and kind of look at what everybody's immediate goals are and then long-term, and I think that'll help us as we look at where to allocate resources. So I know it's a lot of information, but then I will just show you that one screen I was referencing before, the net tax capacity, and this is what that spreadsheet looks like in your packet. So basically what we're kind of looking at here with what's proposed in the proposed preliminary budget is, it's an 8.6% increase, but if you look at our tax rate is actually lower than what the 2022 tax rate is because we've increased our net tax capacity. So I think that's important when we look at, overall, and all the factors that go into this. And then we can run different scenarios. On the bottom here, there's residential taxable market value, just as a hypothetical, a $300,000 home with our tax rate and what the estimated city tax would be. So we can run different scenarios. And one thing I guess I didn't really explain in too great a detail that maybe I should go back and maybe you have some questions on is that community development coordinator position. I don't know if you guys want to talk about that, or maybe you have some questions you want to dive into first. But I guess from my perspective, I'm looking at that in that our city is growing. There's just a lot of pressure with proposed developments and staff just being stretched really thin as far as planning and zoning, economic development. I feel like if we had a full-time community development coordinator position, that person could really relieve some pressure and help actually have time to go after getting new businesses to come to Eagle Lake. We are so heavy with residential and housing, that's great, but we also need to look at getting more commercial to help in our community.
I'll just interject right away. I think that that's the most important full-time position that needs to be added to the city of Eagle Lake. More important than a public works, more important than a police officer. I think that we need to look at expanding, especially along Highway 14, up along the area near Leray Drive and US Highway 14. I think we need to, I think that that person would help us also continue our continued interest in the Mankato Motorsports Park. And I think that having a city plan that was adopted in 1991 is kind of old. Not saying that I'm old, because I was born in 1991, but I think, I actually remember when the 2006 plan came out, because I was young and surfing the web, and I saw it on there with some of the old roads that were slated for different developments out there and stuff. So I think that that's really important, especially right now when we're seeing this major growth. I think that if there's anything that I'm most passionate about tonight at this meeting, it would be getting that person in this office tomorrow.
I would second that, what Garrett said, because it's even taking away all of the future development that is potential, what we currently have is more than what our staff can currently deal with. I think, for me personally, when I hear staff having to go home and do training after hours when kids are in bed, or missing conventions and stuff like that because they can't go because of the workload, that's just not okay. That's gonna be burnout, that's gonna lead to our good staff leaving, and the next person coming in isn't gonna put up with it. They're just gonna say, no, not gonna happen. So I think it has to happen sooner than later, not only for what's already on people's plates, but what future development can happen. So the only question I had, looking through that was more what you plugged in the budget for wages for that person to make sure that we're competitive with what would bring that person in. So I mean, that might be a loaded question there, but.
No, that's a great question, and actually it's on the very low end. And I am concerned about that as well. I talked to the COG, and so I got a whole bunch of really good, data from her on just different types of positions, whether it's economic development coordinator, planning and zoning. So I have a whole bunch of data from different cities of different sizes. And I think that's probably on the low end, but, you know, it's a start. But one other thing I did forget to mention when I'm explaining that we're already stretched thin is that now you add in the component of being an MS4 city, and it's a lot. And I don't know, that's just another aggravating factor here. I'm having to take stormwater trainings, the same as our public works have, become a certified inspector. Never would I have ever imagined as city administrator that I would have to take those, but it's required as being an MS4. So it's just a lot, and so I think if we could bring somebody on, I appreciate the openness that you have towards bringing on a position. I think it would pay for itself, bringing in a couple new businesses.
Are we thinking like 40 hours a week? Like
Yes, I think we could
complete
find the time.
full-time?
Yes, between planning and zoning, and economic development, there's plenty of work that could be done. And, you know, a lot of times I feel like we're reactive right now because you don't have time to be proactive and trying to go and get businesses or get grants that maybe could help position us to be able to get somebody to come here.
Any other questions?
Jennifer, the only other question I had too with your whole list of updates and stuff is you talked about our assignment of the goals, and I remember when we first came on council, we sat down and had that work session. Do you still have that list? I mean, I know I have it at home, but do you have that can be distributed especially
I bet we do. Good
some of the
point,
new
Beth.
ones?
We'll take a look and
At
find
least to
that.
kind of, because I think we prioritized or added in things where that would be a good starting point for
'Kay.
us to revisit.
I bet we do.
Well, to be honest, Jennifer, I was very surprised and pleased by where we're at. You know, I think this is a weird year for America. I mean, I don't think people's wages are going up. I think the last report I heard is that with all the inflation and everything, generally the wages are going down as an average. You know, so we have to look out for residents, and I think if we start off here at that 8.6, which is actually a reduction of the city tax, I think we're accomplishing a lot of stuff and still maintaining that line, so. That's not to say that in a couple of years there aren't gonna be big price tags and big things to do, but I think this keeps us rolling in the right direction, so I was glad to see that number show up. I was thinking in my mind 12 to 15 is where you were going to be throwing something out, and so I think that's good. So you've got an assignment there, and Jennifer, if you'll send out
Yep.
The last goals and things to the council, then if we can just submit back via email,
Yep. Sounds great.
and you can compile that. And then council, take all of these things, I guess, that you've heard tonight, see if you can do a deep dive, dig into some things, see if we have other questions. I think, you know, we've got kind of a direction here that looks good. And then we can pinpoint it. So the preliminary levy has to be established, I think, by the end of September?
Yep.
Is that the,
September 30th, that's right.
and we can still make changes then to the budget as we go through if things come up, but we can only come
Right.
down, so I think we'll be in a good spot there. Yeah, and then just be thinking about how we move forward with, you know, if we want to start looking at siting of a fire station, you know, kind of walking down that path as well, to get that started. And so the next budget session then, I guess, as we all take time to ruminate on this and digest it. We do have Labor Day, the first Monday of September, so our next council meeting is on the 12th.
Yep.
And so we'd have to do something between the 12th and the 30th. Well, I guess in order to establish the preliminary levy, do we have to act on that on the 12th, or we'd have to have a special
Nope.
special meeting on like the 26th?
Yep, that would work just fine. It could be at a special meeting that you adopt and certify the preliminary levy. Yep, as long as I can get it to the county auditor before September 30th.
Would we like to do that? Then we'd have a meeting on the 12th of September and also a meeting Monday, the 26th. And that one would be specifically to look at establishing the preliminary budget. So if we don't have too many changes, it shouldn't be a very long meeting. But then at least we can get that resolution put in and we can get that sent off to the state. So let's plan for the 26th then, Jennifer, on
Okay. Sounds
a
good.
special meeting. Any other budget questions? All right, then let's move on to this last bit of business here that we've got tonight. In your packet is also Resolution 2022-33. And this is accepting the resignation from our part-time Public Works worker, Brian Schumacher. As Andrew had mentioned, he has chosen to resign. So we need to have a motion to accept his resignation.
I'll motion.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? And that carries. Item number 3, Resolution 2022-34, and this is accepting the resignation and notice of retirement from Public Works Director Brian Gettle. So there again, we have a resolution in your packet. He has indicated through his submittal of the advance notice resignation form of his intent to retire on February 3rd, 8th, 10th? Okay. And so we have a resolution accepting his announcement of retirement or resignation. So I'd look for a motion on Resolution 2022-34.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? I will save our discussion. I think we want to have a little bit of discussion here on next steps for hiring a new Public Works Director, so we'll save that here for after the motion, but is there any other discussion on this resolution? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that carries. So then, I guess, Jennifer, next steps, what we need from the council as far as, the intent of the advance resignation notice is to try to translate knowledge from a current employee to their replacement. So I think the next step that we would need to look at is advertising for the position, which might mean we bring on a new person, could be yet even this fall. I think we probably have money in the budget to cover any little bits and pieces there, but to make that transition and do some, I guess, I'm drawing a blank on my words. Transferring of information,
Yep.
transferring of community knowledge. And so Brian's been here a long time, and he gathered it all from Rick, and the two of them have been Public Works Department in my lifetime, basically. So There's a lot of knowledge, I think, that comes down from them. So is there anything, Jennifer, that we need to do outside of just making a motion to advertise for the position?
No, the only question I had was if you wanted to, and typically with department heads, we do advertise externally. There's no formal requirement. Do we want to just advertise it externally and then post it for, internal can apply if there's interest then? Okay. Sounds good. And no, so all we need is just like you said, Mayor, just to go ahead and authorize the posting of that position.
All right, if it's the council's general consensus, then I'd look for a motion to advertise for a new Public Works Director externally.
So moved.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that carries. And Mr. Hartman, I hope you will be in the running for this as well. Sure will. All right. The next item is also a Public Works item, is the approval to advertise and sell the old leaf vac on min-bid.
All right, with the purchase of the new leaf vac last October, there was a little bit of time where both units were being operated, the old and the new, and I think it was determined that it's far more efficient just to use the one and let's retire the 2006 leaf vac. So Public Works would like to advertise that for sale on min-bid. We had good success with the plow truck, got much more than what we anticipated, and that was a 1986 plow truck we sold last December. And I just wasn't sure at the time when I put together this memo what that minimum sale price should be, and talked with Andrew. He maybe has some ideas, maybe council has some ideas as well. Ultimately, whatever funds we get will go back into the 201 Stormwater Fund. So I don't know, Andrew, if you want to share kind of your thoughts.
Yeah, I know Brian was talking to a sales rep and trying to get an idea of what it's worth. Just because you can't, it's nothing like a pickup where you can look up, and see how much it's worth. So we were waiting on him, to get back to us. I don't know when that will be, but we were kind of talking to, and like a minimum bid of $5,000 seems to be pretty reasonable to us. I think we spent $14,000 on it in 2006, so, and we well got our money's worth out of it.
Thoughts from the council?
Jennifer, is that an expense account or is that a capital account that money will go back to?
That would just go back to basically our capital outlay funds. That's a great question. That start putting towards all the other capital outlay needs.
The next $100,000
Yep.
will be.
Any other thoughts if we establish a $5,000 minimum bid?
My thought is less on this and more just a quick question on the new leaf vac. We'll be going just to one person running that one, not the 2 or 3 like this one, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. And I would say the 5,000 minimum or whatever the consultant comes back saying it should be listed at, hoping it's not below that 5,000 mark.
Well, then would anyone like to make a motion to authorize the posting and sale of the leaf vac with a minimum bid of $5,000, or if we hear back from, if they say 6,000, we raise it up, so it'd be a motion to minimum at 5,000 or whatever the recommendation is from.
Right, and I can
From
reach
that
out to
source.
him tomorrow and try and
I'd
Get
make
that.
that motion.
price.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that carries. Looks like I inadvertently jumped over advertising for a part-time Public Works employee.
I think, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking tonight, you know, if we're obviously still have some time through the remainder of 2022, it might not hurt to go ahead and just advertise for a person right now, and then if in, you know, 2023, we're able to make do with our fourth full-time, I mean, we're still gonna probably need help, and it'd make sense if we could find a part-time person to help with mowing. I thought we should probably look at still going ahead and trying to advertise for that position. Brian Shoemaker was very dependable and reliable, and he will be missed. He was a really good employee the last couple of years. It'll be hard to replace him.
And they play a big role in helping with snow plowing, doing cul-de-sacs and alleyways.
And so if we advertise part-time, are we anticipating that, you know, if we got applicants, you know, the two skills are gonna be snow plowing and mowing primarily that we're looking for, but we would try to get them in as emergency snow plow, extra help, that
Yep.
type of thing, so utilize them right away?
Right.
If there's no other questions from the council, then I'd look for a motion to also advertise for a part-time public works worker.
I'll motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that carries. Lastly, a resolution 2022-35, and this is a resolution asking the state legislature to come together in a special session. As you know, there were a number of items that were particularly of interest to the city of Eagle Lake, especially with getting some funding for this water treatment facility. And then also to, you know, look at LGA and things like that. I know League of Minnesota Cities and Council of Greater Minnesota Governments have all been kind of pushing, asking communities to kind of join in this effort, to ask for a special session. And I don't know when they were planning on delivering all of this, but it was relatively soon, was it
Yes.
not?
They put out a call, and then I think the timing of cities and city council meetings, they put out another call saying we haven't gotten a lot, send more. So I think it's just a matter of kind of when they put that call out. It was after that conference I went to. And so yes, we'll get this sent off right away. If you guys
So
adopt it.
normal session starts, I believe, in February. If we wait, if they don't convene a special session, so, you know, basically, we're just asking them to go back and finish the work that they did not finish. So you see the resolution in your packet, Resolution 2022-35, just in support of a special session of the Minnesota State Legislature. I look for a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? And that carries. I've got it here. I will get a signed copy to you then for that. Is there anything else that we need to address? I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned.
Thanks,